college football. It was rivalry weekend. Games.
By the way, college football much better than the NFL this week. In my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Definitely a lot on the line, big games, lots of pressure on, very exciting. And college football games are more fun anyway. Don't get me wrong, I love the NFL, but individual college games are always more fun. The pageantry, the whole thing that goes with it. The fans get much more intense, much crazier. The NFL in certain cities, it's that way, but there were a lot of empty seats in Jacksonville today, for instance.
Yeah. Well, and it's just basically like that's funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking of mentioning something like that too. Like, the affinity that fans have for a college team is just different. You can say it's more, or it's better or whatever. It's just different than for the NFL. There's fans that really care about their NFL teams, but I mean, in college, it's just the atmosphere that you get at these games, particularly these kind of rivalry games. Like, I was watching, my wife and I were watching, because my wife went to Florida State, so we were watching Florida State play Florida, and I understand maybe that game doesn't have as much as it would have in the 90s, in terms of Florida schools, being really good in college football. But, just really awesome game, And then, of course, you have the Michigan game. I mean, NFL, like, I'm trying to think. So the Big House has like 105,000 people, like, that's capacity. NFL stadiums are not, I mean, I'm trying to think of what they have. I mean, they're not, NFL stadiums are not 20,000 people. They're like 60 or 70,000 or something like that. But it just feels like college games, they just have more people there, and there's just more, and maybe it's because it's younger people, so there's college students, and they get more amped up for it. I don't know, but it's a different deal.
Yeah, and I think the college football has a tradition built into it, where the NFL, we have some traditions, but it changes so much.
Right.
It doesn't, it's not the same. You know what I mean? It would be different if, like, because in the NFL, like, a team can go from good to bad. Like, the Rams can win the Super Bowl and then be really bad this year. In college football, that doesn't happen as much, right? Michigan and Ohio State are good every year.
Right, so and also you don't have, especially with rivalries, Michigan and Ohio State have played for over 100 years. So they can literally, people who are fans of either team can say, oh, I remember this game back in 1996, or this game back in 1984, or this game in 2011 or 2006, or this game that just happened, And there's all kinds of stuff, and especially you look at, oh yeah, that guy won the Heisman, or yeah, I remember that guy, he went to the NFL and he was really good, or that guy, whatever. And so I'm trying to put it more into words. It's just kind of hard to, but it's just, there's a different, it's kind of like the way people are with football, not American football. I'm talking soccer, kind of the way fans are, especially like at the World Cup and some of these big soccer matches. I mean, the chanting and just how into it they are. It's not really the same with the NFL.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, when we've talked about this in the past, the NFL product is better. Don't get me wrong. The level of football in the NFL is better. We're not debating that. Okay. But the product in college football is just so much more amazing. I don't understand. Like, this is one of the things that I don't get is I don't understand the NFL fan that doesn't like to watch college, and I don't understand the college football fan that doesn't watch the NFL. Like, I don't understand why is the NFL so much more popular. I realize because the NFL is in major cities, so it grabs just a higher population of people. But I don't understand why college football is not more popular. I just don't get it. I just feel like it should clearly be the second best sport, and the championship game should be getting, 40, 50 million people to watch it. And it does. I'm just confused.
Well, especially because you have, these bigger, the teams that are in the national championship picture are usually pretty big schools. So they have a lot of people, not just going there now, but a lot of people who've gone there for decades, and they're spread, and them and their children are spread throughout the country, because they don't often stay there. A lot of these places are like college towns. They don't stay there. They move, somewhere else in the country. So you would think that there is a lot of that, where there's a lot of affinity for a team, that kind of spreads down through the generations, or just because you went to school there and so you watch football there. So now you still watch it, you still pay attention to it. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't. Maybe it's because there's not. I don't know. I mean, I guess they don't. I don't know if they do fantasy football for college football. But that's only a little. Yeah, I don't. And also the other thing with college football, and I was saying that I think I was texting this to you yesterday. I mean, if you have, I don't want to say basic cable package, but just a sort of standard cable package that has like news channels and sports channels, you can, like during a college football Saturday, you can watch like 7-8 games, because you'll have multiple games on like ESPN, ABC, Fox, FS1, if you have a more beefed up cable package, and there's other channels you could get, like if you have ESPN Plus, you get like the SEC network and like Big 12 network and stuff like that. But it's all, with the NFL, you got to pay for Red Zone, or you got to pay for DirecTV to watch all the games. College football, right. You can watch, especially, games that are in your local area. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so anyway, we'll get into the game. So, first, that Michigan-Ohio State game, listen, Ohio State really, both teams really showed me something. I've been complaining the whole season, that from what I've been seeing from these teams has concerned me, because I know this game is coming up. And so, for Michigan, I was concerned that, boy, they didn't really throw the ball a lot. They didn't make big plays in the passing game, which really surprises me, because when you run the ball as well as they do, you would think you would have all kinds of opportunities to test this out and work this in throughout the season, but they really didn't. They really didn't do that. And then, so my instinct coming into the season was, boy, I think Michigan may have a hard time beating Ohio State again. The game's in Columbus, and I don't know that the weather's going to be the same and all that stuff. But as the season went on, I watched Ohio State and I went, yeah, it concerns me, because they have major lulls with their offense where they go through 2 or 3 quarters in a game where they're really struggling to get down the field and get points. And so then I thought, and then, you can't tell how good good or bad Ohio State's defense is, because they're playing all these Big Ten teams. And so it became a real challenge. So, so I wrote down, for both sides, Michigan showed me they can throw the ball. Especially when Ohio State's playing cover 0 for half the game, where they're manning guys up outside. They're leaving no help in the middle of the field and just, hey, all right, 1-on-1, that just surprised me. The other thing was that Ohio State's defense is terrible. I had no idea that it was this bad. They're leaving guys wide open. Then they couldn't stop the running game in the second half. They had to bring everybody down to the line in the first half to try to stop the run, and they couldn't. And so the game was a bit of a track meet in the first half, but Michigan was able to hang in there because they made 2 huge plays throwing the ball. One where it was just kind of a bailout play, and the guy just beat one guy and then was gone. And then the other one, the guy's running down the field wide ass open. And so they managed to hang in there in the first half. I thought they might have been in trouble because of what Ohio State was doing, but Michigan forced them to kick a lot of field goals. And then in the second half, it was like the floodgates opened. Michigan was able to run the ball, and then they just basically ran them over. And Ohio State scored 3 points in the second half. Michigan outscored them 28-3 in the second half. So yeah, I was shocked by how explosive Michigan was able to be. I think that the running the ball with J.J. McCarthy is something that they should have been doing all along. I don't understand why they're not doing that more, because the guy he changes, as we say this, the quarterback running changes the math of your defense. It just makes it really hard to stop. And any time that he ran with the ball, Ohio State had problems. So, yeah, it really shows me that, I think Michigan was the superior team the whole time, and I think Ohio State's got some issues. But go ahead, what was your take on the game?
Yeah, so basically, the best way to sum up that game is Michigan came out, they went into Columbus, Ohio, into Ohio State Stadium, and kicked their ass in the second half. Okay? When Ohio State's defense they got burned I mean, they had like two huge touchdown runs. They had those two or three like passing touchdowns that were just long bombs down the field. I mean, when you get burned like that, I mean, they got their asses kicked. And then basically, if you noticed, even in the first half, when Ohio State would do well on first and second down, they were pretty good, and they would make big plays and they could get into the end zone. But if they had to get to third down, it was trouble because they sucked on third down. And so they couldn't keep drives going. Drives kept sputtering out, So, Michigan was clear. I mean, just clearly, unequivocally the best team. And I'm not saying that I would do this, but if the committee were to rank Michigan number one, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. I wouldn't do that. I would still take Georgia. But, I mean, do you understand on the road in college football to go into their stadium and they kicked their ass. I mean, the way Ohio State's defense got burned, and it just kind of, it speaks to, something Colin Cowherd kept talking about, like he didn't think Ohio State was tough enough because if you kind of push them around, they just kind of, that's it. You push them around, you get on top of them, and that's it. You're going to win the game. And Michigan just started pushing. At first I thought Ohio State was going to kind of take over in the first half because it kind of looked like Michigan wasn't going to have enough offense because they could not run the ball. And they let Michigan hang around, and Ohio State didn't score enough. It seemed like they should have scored more, and they didn't. So, yeah, maybe they did get kind of pushed around. Maybe that is kind of their MO. They get pushed around, and then you kind of beat them. So we'll see if Ohio State manages to get in. There still is a possibility. I did think it was kind of ridiculous that that I saw a quote from the Big Ten commissioner because he was interviewed. I guess he was at the game, and then he was interviewed afterward.
Yep.
And he's like, "Well, I think these clearly are the two of the best teams in the country." And I'm just like, I mean, Michigan is, and Ohio State may still get in there, but I mean, first of all, you're kind of biased. But second of all, I'm like, that's what you come away from that game thinking? I come away from that game thinking that Ohio State's kind of a fraud and Michigan is pretty damn good. So, that's, of course, the Big Ten commissioner is going to say that. And he even said something, he said, throw the rankings out. What do you really think? It's like, dude, okay, no, we can't really do that. Okay, slow down. But, we'll see if Ohio State gets in. It's kind of, they didn't really, I'm trying to remember who Ohio State played this year. Like, they beat Penn State, right?
They were losing that game. They were losing that game in the fourth quarter.
Right. Okay, and then they beat
Notre Dame.
Okay, that's a good win. But Michigan is obviously way more impressive than them, and then you got to kind of go, well, is Ohio State more impressive than USC or who else is down there? TCU. I don't really know. That's kind of splitting hairs. I could see people arguing, any way they want to, but it's just kind of, I don't know. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, listen, that win beating Ohio State at Ohio State is going to be looked at as a tremendous win.
Yep.
And I think it's a good win, but I don't think this is earth shattering. I don't think they didn't beat 2019 LSU.
Right.
I don't think Ohio State was really that good to begin with. I think Michigan still has some issues. I think Ohio State's defense was pretty freaking awful, and you could see that they didn't really believe in it because they were putting 9 guys in the box at the beginning of the game. So you could see they were like, we can't stop them from running. We're going to have to bring extra guys. And then as soon as they adjusted out of that, and even on the big runs in the second half, they had a bunch of guys at the line, but they beat one guy off the line, and that was it. He was gone. So yeah, I think it's eye opening, and my sense is, and this worries me, that this is just like 2006, 2007, where the Big Ten, everybody thinks these teams from the Big Ten are really good. All they're playing are teams from the Big Ten, and then they go play an SEC school and they get absolutely destroyed because they don't have the same level of athletes. And so I have a suspicion that may be happening here, but we'll see. I was impressed with what Michigan did. I thought Colin Cowherd had a really good tweet. He basically said, before the game, if I'd have suggested Harbaugh was a better coach than Ryan Day, a bunch of people would have gotten on me. But I think it's obvious. I think it's beyond any shadow of a doubt. Harbaugh is one of the best coaches in the country, and I think he's significantly better than the guy at Ohio State.
Right.
Period. Michigan doesn't have a first-round pick quarterback. Michigan doesn't have all of the first-round wide receivers and all of this stuff. And they are symbolic of all the Harbaugh teams. They're tough. They're consistent. They come to play. They don't quit. They play. They give you 60 minutes. They don't quit the whole time. So, I think I think Harbaugh should get all the money that Michigan has.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the one of the challenges, and we've talked about this, one of the challenges with college football is these teams most of their games are against their own conference, and so it's tough to judge one conference against another. We kind of have to bring in style points. We have to bring in years past, what's happened before, what teams have like draft prospects there, how many do they have, when the eye test, what do we see when we watch these teams from different conferences. So I think what it ends up coming down to is, you kind of, to a degree, you have to go, well, which team earned it, right? And so Michigan, if they end up beating Purdue next week in the Big Ten championship game, they've earned it. They've earned being one of the top 4 teams. TCU, they went out. I think you kind of say that. USC, assuming they went out, I think that's, you probably say that, because you look at the other teams and you can go, well, I think LSU on its best day is better than USC. Okay, but USC only has one loss, and if they win out, they'll only have one loss, and they'll be a conference champion. So, I kind of got to go with that. And then Georgia, say they win out. I mean, they've obviously, not only were they the national champions last year, but they've just won every game, and they'll be conference champions if they win next weekend. So it's like they've kind of earned it. And as far as who's better than the other, a lot of stuff goes into that, and people who are Big Ten fans will be biased toward the Big Ten over the SEC or something like that, which that's fine. That is what it is. And I think you just kind of go with who earned it, who had the better year, even though you may think, well, this one team, I think there's a team ranked below them that's better. They had a better year, so I'm going to take that into account and sort of say they earned it more than these other teams.
Well, yeah, as Reese Davis on ESPN likes to say, it's a mosaic, right? It's not just most deserving or just which team's the best. It's a combination of it's a mixture of all of those things. Best wins, best losses. It's a mixture of all of that stuff. And so that's why I know everybody and their mother likes to complain about the committee. I actually kind of like it because it's a subjective poll, and so we should take every piece of information that we can get, and that's how we should decide it. But we'll talk about the rankings in a minute. So I wrote down Oregon and Clemson showed that they're frauds. Clemson really, if you read the stat line, first of all, the stat line for DJ Uiagalelei, he was 8 for 29 for 99 yards.
Yeah, he stinks.
For the whole game. It was like, wow. Oh, my God, that's terrible. I don't think they scored in the second half. South Carolina, again, pulls off an upset. I kept looking at that game, like, what is happening here? And, turnovers by Clemson. And, South Carolina played well, but not great. And,
one of the things, not to bring this back to what we were talking about before, but one of the cool things about, and this is totally different from the NFL, one of the really cool things about these rivalries is like, South Carolina, Clemson, some of the people who are at South Carolina may have wanted to go to Clemson, but they didn't get in. So they didn't go to South Carolina and thinking, when I play Clemson, I'm going to kick their ass, or vice versa. You don't get that in the NFL. That's one of the coolest things, when you see, maybe sometimes the commentators talk about stuff like that, but I just think that that's really fascinating. Especially in a game like that, or my wife and I were watching FSU play Florida, and that there's some of that going on too. So it's really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, the ACC the last 2 weeks got completely taken out of any contention for anything. Yep. North Carolina lost to North Carolina State. They lost to Georgia Tech, and then Clemson got beat by South Carolina. And it just, wow, people were talking about the ACC a couple weeks ago, but not anymore. Completely out. No need to have a conversation at all. Really cleared the way for basically everybody. Oregon is one of those teams. I think their coach might be the college version of Brandon Staley, because they go for fourth downs like it's going out of style. Okay, they have the lead in the game. They're up by 3 in the game with like 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They go for a fourth down in their own territory.
Where?
Okay. They don't, it was like at their own 35. You know, they go for fourth down. They don't get it. Of course, Oregon State goes and scores, takes the lead. You know, they did the same thing earlier in the game. They could have kicked a field goal, went for fourth down, you know, when it was like at the opposing team's 15, didn't get it. Like, they scored 34 points in the game, and they gave away 14 points, or at least, well, not 14, probably 10 points at least, that they easily should have had. So, and, you know, it just goes to, that's the thing, like, I'm watching the game, it's different than, that's another thing different than the NFL. They're up 31-10, and I'm like, I can't turn this off. Because Oregon allows everyone back in the game. It's the Pac-12. Number one, it's the Pac-12. So you know teams can score. There's not an issue there. I think Washington State combined for 86 points in the game they played last night. So, you know, I'm like, well, I can't turn this off. You know, when TCU was up, you know, 34-7, I was like, okay, it's good. I don't need to worry about this. I know it's the Big 12, but I don't need to worry about this. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to let them score 27 points. And but Oregon managed to lose the game. All they needed to win that game. They'd have been in the Pac-12 championship, you know, and they completely just sabotaged themselves. So, yeah. You know,
real quick, so I should get into this. I thought this was pretty funny. So, I don't normally watch football with my wife, but she went to Florida State, so we ended up watching the Florida State-Florida game.
Yep.
I mean, you know, sometimes I get mad at the TV. Sometimes I yell I yell when I'm watching sports, or I get excited about stuff. I mean, she's just like yelling at the commentators. She's yelling at the Florida players. She's just like, their cornbread's not done in the middle of those jerks, you know. And then there was something that happened twice. The quarterback for Florida State played really well. And he was running around a bunch, and he had 2 plays where he ran into the end zone, but he was down like just before the end zone. So they ended up calling a touchdown, then they reviewed it, and then they overturned it, but then they ended up scoring anyway. So she's like, we scored 4 touchdowns, and they gave us credit for 2. You know, we should have blown them out, you know, whatever. So, it was pretty funny.
You know, just kind of running down the list here. TCU took care of business. We've been waiting for them to stop having these games where the team jumps out to a lead. They came out, jumped on Iowa State, and just pounded them into the dirt for 4 quarters, which I was happy for that. And now they get their shot. You know, they get Kansas State in the Big 12 title game, and they may have a chance to get in even if they lose, but if they win, they're in for sure.
Yeah.
So that was fun. I think, you know, as far as, you know, things that kind of struck me, I think Florida State and LSU, they're the teams that going forward into next year, I say look out. Those are teams that I'm like, they could be seriously dangerous. You know, Florida State was 9-3. LSU's 9-3.
Back? Jordan Travis, I think.
He should be back. He should be back. LSU's quarterback, maybe not. We'll see. But they've recruited such good players that, you know, I think LSU could be scary good next year. Like, look out with you know, half the teams in the SEC, their quarterbacks are moving on, graduating or going to the NFL. So that was really cool. The USC Notre Dame game. If you haven't seen Caleb Williams yet, look it up, man. The guy is a blast. You know, he's just kind of, it's like Patrick Mahomes, but kind of like Houdini at the same time.
Yeah.
He just he will drop back and just wait for defensive linemen to come towards him. So then he can just get out of their way. You know, it's just like he's almost toying with Notre Dame last night. And it was kind of cruel. He made several plays where I was just like, okay, that's mean. That's just insensitive, man. I mean, what are you doing? Like they literally have no chance. So, I think he should win the Heisman. It shouldn't even be a conversation. I thought Notre Dame played pretty well. It's just they turned the ball over a couple times and
fumbled. If Drew Pine hadn't fumbled in the second half, it might have been a closer game. That really kind of swung things, and they just couldn't stop USC. So,
yeah, I mean, I think USC has some issues as far as that's just shocking to me that USC has a really good chance now to be in the playoff. I can't believe it. In Lincoln Riley's first year, like that's insanity to be, looking at going to the playoff and winning the conference your first year. I mean, it's absolute insanity. And, I don't know that I don't think they're, the best team. I don't think they're probably going to win the championship, but if you're playing them, it's not a fun team to play, because they put so much pressure on you with their offense that it gets pretty scary. So, let's talk about the rankings. Look, I think there's obviously a lot of parity this year. So, I mean, I'm going to say I think Georgia's the best team, but outside of that, you could kind of talk me into anything that you want because all these teams have huge flaws. We can see what they are, and so you could talk me into whatever you want. But what I will say is and this goes out to, Danny Cannell and everybody out there on Twitter complaining about the committee incessantly because, LSU was ranked ahead of USC. Okay. I'm tired of the whining. I'm tired of the complaining. Like, knock it off. The committee is doing a really good job. Okay. They've gotten it right every single year, every single time. Even when I'm disagreeing with them, they've gotten it right. Okay. They're going to have it right this week. They're going to have it right next week. All right. So I wish people would just knock it off. Danny Cannell went into his whole thing. Well, with so much parity this year, it should really be the 4 best conference champions. Look, do you want the 4 best teams or not? Okay.
Right.
Do we want to just make all kinds of loopholes and let everybody in that we feel like gets in?
He may get what he wants because Georgia, assuming they win the SEC, Michigan winning the Big Ten, and then you got TCU and potentially TCU and USC. Aren't those the 4 best conference champions? So you may end up getting what you want. I mean,
right. You're probably going to get. You're right. Exactly right, Clark. You're probably going to get that anyway. So I just wish everyone would quit bitching about it. Now, as far as arguments about this week, I think it's pretty clear it's going to be Georgia 1, Michigan 2, TCU 3, USC 4, and Ohio State 5, with Alabama probably behind them at 6. Look, if anybody, if TCU or USC lose or Michigan loses, I don't think Michigan will, but if any of those teams loses, then I think you've got
Ohio
a pretty
State
good
would be in,
right. You got a pretty good argument there, especially if USC loses because they already have one loss. That Ohio State should get in. Now, look, if you're asking me, do I think Ohio State's one of the 4 best teams? No, I'm sorry. Like, I think Alabama's one of the 4 best teams. Like, everybody's going to complain. Oh, but they have 2 losses. They lost twice, once in overtime, once on a last-second field goal. Give me a break. They lost to 2 of the best teams in the country.
Don't you think if Bama just had 1 loss, people wouldn't really be complaining? I mean, people would still complain because that's what we do, but I don't think it would be as bad as if they have 2 losses. I would kind of think that the committee would still put Ohio State in over a 2-loss team, but I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that. I think it's kind of splitting hairs a little bit because Bama's not as good as they used to be, but those 2 losses were right at the end, So it's kind of, I don't know.
Right, Ohio State's best wins are Notre Dame and Penn State. Alabama beat Ole Miss. They beat.
And Bama's 2 losses were on the road. Ohio State at home got their asses kicked.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're asking me, do I think Alabama is probably, would they beat just about everybody in the country? Yeah, they probably would. If this was I just think it would be really fascinating this year with a 12-team playoff because it would just be Alabama just sitting there waiting. Like 6th or 7th, team in the country, and you got to play them. Like, good luck.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. Good luck to you if you end up in that situation. But I think I think this year it's pretty clear because of all the teams that lost. I think it's pretty clear cut, unless we have, some crazy upset and win one of the championship games. I think we kind of know who the 4 teams are.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much in agreement. I mean, USC lost to Utah on a 2-point conversion on the road, right? They get Utah on a neutral field now this time. So I got to think USC probably wins, right? Michigan's playing Purdue. I mean, I don't need to go into why Michigan's going to win that game. I think Michigan could win that game with one hand behind their back. TCU had a tough game with Kansas State. They had to come back to beat them. So that could be the one that's ripe for a loss. But you could argue, even if TCU loses, that their resume is better than Ohio State's is.
Yeah.
And even if they lose,
they're playing that at the Cowboys Stadium. So
right.
I don't know if that's more of a home game for TCU. I don't know where Texas Christian University is located in Texas, but
it's close to Dallas, Fort Worth.
It's close to okay. All right, then maybe it's kind of a home game for them. So yeah, TCU maybe they got a really good chance to win.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't understand. I don't think there's that much complaining left to do about the rankings. Like, I really don't. And I'm sorry, I don't care about, this team has 2 losses and this team has 1 loss. I really don't. Put the resumes up next to each other. I bet you they're pretty close. And at the end of the day, who's better?
Well, and the other thing is that I'll just say this: there may be some complaining from some teams ranked 6, 7, 8, or something like that. And I'll just say this: this is kind of like when teams complain about the men's basketball tournament, not getting in. And a lot of times the teams that complain, it's like, yeah, dude, you had this many losses and you were kind of shaky the whole year. Why are we thinking it's a travesty that you didn't get in? So I just kind of feel like those teams ranked around there, it's going to be like, you had too many losses, dude. You were too inconsistent during the year. What do you want me to do? There's other teams who had a better all around year. So I'm going to take them over these other teams that, while I think on a good day could be really, really good, you didn't have the best year this year. So,
right, yeah. Do I? Again, but I'm not trying to be judgmental here. TCU deserves to get in. Do I think TCU is one of the best 4 teams? No, I don't. But this is how the system works. But I just find it funny now that we're not going to have any complaints about the rankings. It's going to be kind of done because we can all see everybody sees what it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think my dad, I was talking to my dad after the games last night, and he basically said, well, how do I know USC is better than Ohio State? And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. How do I know that they're better? But they're going to get in because they won their conference, so they're going to give them the benefit of the doubt there. When I can't tell you that they're better, I can tell you they're pretty close.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt who the best offense in the country is, though.
Right.
I think USC owns that. I don't think there's any doubt about any of that because USC does this every single week. Doesn't matter who the team is. They had the one game against Oregon State where they kind of struggled, but for the most part, they're putting in 35 to 40 every week.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it should be really, really exciting. I am really interested to see how how LSU does against Georgia. Just kind of looking forward into next year. I realize as far as playoffs go, LSU's not going to get in now because of their loss to Texas A&M, which,
right.
So just before we talk about our last thing here. So it's just fascinating to me. So that's it. So we basically, that's the end of the regular season. So Auburn, Michigan State, Texas A&M, and the University of Miami not going to bowl games. But you know who is? Duke, Kansas, Connecticut, Appalachian State.
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't tell you what kind of upside down year it was in college football. I don't know what to tell you. So, anything else?